everyone. I'm John Self, and welcome to Lunch and Learn for Thursday, December the 8th, 2022. Today, we're going to talk about protecting your career from bad recruiting. Hopefully, we will give you some inside scoop based on my 27 years of global executive search, how you can avoid getting caught up in bad recruiting. So let's do what we always do first, and that is let's look at the job market and the latest reports that we've gotten in from the Labor Department today. First of all, according to the Labor Department, there were 230,000 additional jobs in the market today, and 230,000 additional new employment claims today, and that adds to the 1.6 million that were already in the marketplace. So we seem to be having problems again, technically, with the slides, and so we're going to stop for just a moment and get this fixed if we can. Okay, there were 230,000. I'm sorry, we've got that fixed now, the modern things of technology. There were 230,000 new unemployment claims filed last week ending December 30th. They joined 1.6 million that were already on unemployment. Now, let's look at that 1.6 million on unemployment. That compares to about 1.7 million, which were on the rolls of unemployment prior to the start of the pandemic. So that's an interesting sort of observation. Layoffs are continuing, but they're not yet widespread. That's good news if you have a job and you're worried about losing it. But if you're the Fed, it's a little bit concerning, because the only way they can control inflation is raise interest rates and hopefully drop down, cut back on wages and cut back on the unemployment, raise the unemployment. And that's a very painful way to do it, and people don't like that, but it's the only way you can do it. So that's what's happening, and the fact that the wage picture maintains, it's still strong. There's one person for every two job opportunities out there. That's problematic for the Fed, and so we look for them to continue to raise interest rates. Now, Business Insider has reported this week that early in 2023, we'll bring a shift in focus from the inflation rate to corporate expenses and earnings, and that will fuel additional layoffs. Okay. Now, the current estimate suggests that unemployment will rise in the first and second quarter of 2023 from 3.7% to 4.5%. 3.7% is a historical low or close to it. In terms of job losses, this will add more than 1.5 million new job losses. Now, on a more concerning note, the International Monetary Fund estimated that the unemployment rate may have to go up to 7.5% in order for the Fed to meet its inflation target of 2%. Now, the last 10 months, the inflation rate's been averaging about 7.75%. So the IMF projection may be more accurate than any of us want to believe. And here's what is troubling about that projection. An unemployment rate of 7.5% means an additional 6.5 million people would lose their job. Now, that is really unsettling, particularly if you've never gone through one of these slowdowns before. The Generation X certainly has, and some of the early stage millennials have. But a lot of people in the millennial Gen Z group have not had to go through this in a big way. Unless, of course, you were in the services and beverage and the industries that were really hammered by the pandemic. Now, by comparison, during the height of the pandemic, 14 million people lost their jobs. So even 7.5%, 6.5 million additional people would lose their jobs. That is really unsettling. That is one of those the polite way to say it is yikes. This is not an apocalyptical situation yet, but the prudent move is to develop a career layoff plan and begin networking as well as monitoring opportunities in your industry. Now, here's some observations about which you should be aware. These are some important facts. First of all, more than 70% of all jobs are not listed. We've talked about this before. This means that you really need to have people who can tell you about positions that are opening, that are really good jobs, but may not ever make any public display on a job board or even on the website for an organization. Those jobs are known by people and the internal recruiters, maybe the search firms, and people that are close to the organization. Those people are the people who can help refer you to those situations. External recruiters, now that's retained search consultants and contingency recruiters, they only handle about 30% of all the jobs that are filled each year. And so that means that the corporate talent acquisition people are taking on more and more of the recruiting. The question then is, why is recruiting so dysfunctional? Why has it become so dysfunctional? And a lot of people say, well, it's those damn AI systems, the ATS scanners and the new sourcing systems. Now, given that ATS scanners, the applicant tracking systems, are the bane of so many job seekers, it would please me to tell you, yes, that's the problem. But the simple answer is that's not the problem. The dirty, big little secret of recruiting, internal and external recruiters, is that many of the placements that are made don't succeed. And in some cases, the failure rate is almost 60%. Many of these failures occur within the first 18 months outside the firm. If you use an outside firm, most of them are going to give you, if it's in a contingency firm, a 60, 90, maybe a 180-day guarantee. Bigger firms are going to give you a 12-month guarantee. But if many of those failures occur outside the 18 months, they're outside the guarantee. And so the firm is not obligated to do a replacement search. The cost of turnover and the cost of mishires is running about $630 billion a year for businesses. Now, here's the interesting thing. Most companies, the vast majority of companies, do not report turnover costs on their financial statements, and none, or maybe, I'm not going to say none, but virtually no one tells their board. Why? Because that's their big, dirty, dark secret. It is a major, major expense. And because nobody wants to talk about it, nobody feels accountable to a board or to a senior executive, there's no one rushing to fix the problem. And the bad news is you could get hit by that truck while you're crossing the street looking for a new job. And here's what's really maddening. The recruiting fail rate is virtually unchanged since the mid-1990s when the old corporate executive board started tracking this. And in the first year that they were tracking it, they found that executives, 40% of all executives didn't even last 18 months. People brought in from outside the organizations by search firms. So why is this happening? Well, first of all, recruiting is fiercely transactional. There's no meaningful financial accountability. So unless there's a big financial punishment or a penalty, it's basically transactional. Did that candidate meet the criteria? Did that candidate do a good job in the interviews? Did the company make the offer? Did they last longer than 12 months? We're free. We don't have to worry about that. Well, the truth is the overwhelming number of companies who do not report or acknowledge the cost of turnover are not going to really, there's no rush for them to change because they're not looking at this as a problem. And in fact, it is a significant problem, particularly if you're the one getting laid off. I told somebody the other day that the unemployment rate may be 3.7%, but when you get laid off, it becomes 100%. So that's why this issue is so important for you to come to grips with. It is important for you to understand this issue because your career is the one that's going to get banged up by bad recruiting. The applicant screening is flawed. Recruiters don't pay attention to the make or break factors like cultural compatibility. Imagine that. So what can you do to protect your career? Well, first of all, and this is not an answer any of you want to hear, but you have to be more accountable for how the process works and how a search firm structure could impact your career. Okay? If it is a retained search firm, they work like consultants. And they will probably have more information and more insight on the employer, and they will probably share more information with you. If you're a manager and you're called by a recruiter from one of the local firms or somebody you've never heard before, maybe one of the national franchise operations, and there are plenty of those out there, and they say, we've got this job and we've seen your resume on LinkedIn, and we think you're perfect. You're just going to be great for this job. They start selling you. And they want to move this process along fast, because if they're working on a non-exclusive basis, if they don't get you in the door and you're not picked before anybody else gets their candidate in the door, they don't get paid. And if they don't get paid, they don't keep their job. And so it is very much transactional. It's very much fee-driven. And I will tell you, there are some great contingency recruiters out there, and there are great retained recruiters. But in both shops, retained and contingency recruiting, and you can have people that can move seamlessly from their desk to a used car lot. Just like there are great used car salesmen, there are some great recruiters. But there are also a lot of sharks swimming out there who are focused on meeting their numbers, because if they don't, they lose their job. So they have no sense of obligation to tell you something that you might need to know, that the culture is dysfunctional, that they put on a good show, but they've turned over a lot of people, that the last person they held this job didn't last more than 14 months. They've had 4 people in this job over the last 3 years. Things like that. They might not tell you that if they thought it was going to make you want to pull back and pull out of the job. So you have to do a better job peeling back the layers of the employer's organization. So you need to ask a lot of questions, and the contingency recruiters are going to get frustrated with that because they need to move, quick, get you in. So you can say, look, tell me what you know, and one of the things they're probably not going to tell you is what the wage and salary plan is. So you need to know that, because you don't want a contingency recruiter sending in your resume to an unnamed company that you don't know who it is, and for a job that you may not take because the salary is below what you're currently making. So you need to really push for that information. They'll say, well, what are you making? Oh, I think we can work something out. Be very leery of that. I mean, this is how people get screwed over. Okay, you need to ask for additional details about the job. What's the turnover rate? What's the culture like? Why did the last person leave this job? The organization's culture. How will the supervisor define success? Being a recruiter, it's flattering. It's a flattering event, but, and this is a big but, the recruiter is the employer's prospective agent. It is the prospective employer's agent, Even if you know them, you go to church with you play golf with them, you have drinks periodically, you see each other at annual events, meetings, etc., and you have a good relationship, and maybe you've even hired them in the past to do work for your organization. When it comes to this search, where they're recruiting you for another client, they may be your friend, but you cannot trust them. Not because they're bad people, but because their loyalty must be with the client. And if the client is, they can't afford to risk the client. Why? Let's look at retained recruiting. If you're a partner in a retained firm, you're looked at for how you're evaluated several points. Number one, how much new business do you bring to the table? How many clients do you retain? What's your book of business? Is it growing? So you have to retain existing clients and find new ones. And do you had any controversies with your placements? So those recruiters, are focusing on those issues, not their friendship with you. Secondly, and they might be able to balance that, but at the end of the day, these are their priorities. They also are not going to submit a candidate who may have history that they will then have to explain to the employer. So you have to understand, they're not your friend. It's a business relationship, and their priorities are focused on the needs of the clients and their needs in terms of supporting their job and their firm. Okay, now this is really important. Always ask what the placement guarantee is. Always ask if they're retained or exclusive, or contingency or retained, and if it's an exclusive or non-exclusive agreement. Here's why. You are being recruited. They are recruiting you, and that makes you feel good because somebody really thought a lot of you to pick up the phone and call you. But you must look at the prospective employer with an equally, I say, uncritical eye. And what I mean by that is that you have to be an equally critical eye. You have to not be as critical as the employer is. You have to be more critical because this is your career. If you don't work out, the employee is just going to swipe you off like a little dandruff on the shoulder. That sounds pretty crude, but that's how it works. So this is your career. You have to be unequal in terms of really, really pushing the questions, trying to find out what the job is about, why there's been turnover, what is success going to look like, how do decisions get made, why do people leave the organization. Oh, by the way, interviewer, have you ever thought about leaving the organization? Really? That's interesting. Tell me more. Why did you decide to stay? That's the kind of information you really need. And listen, if they don't like you asking questions, then you're talking to the wrong people. Because unless you're desperate for a job, you really can't afford to get caught in the swirl that's out there called bad recruiting. Okay, be polite. Don't hold back asking the critical questions. And as I just said, the tell me more questions can be extremely effective. Tell me about the culture. Well, that's very interesting. Tell me more. How are decisions made? That's interesting. That sounds like something that I'd like. Tell me more. Tell me about the operations and finance. How is this industry doing in terms of competition? How are you in terms of how did you do in terms of prior layoffs? Is there any union activity? The whole myriad of issues. You want to ask about operations and finance, and anytime you hear something that you want to know more, ask them to tell you more. What's the turnover rate? That's really, really important because that also will speak to the culture. And then why do you stay? That's really, really helpful. So these are a few of the questions you should ask. When we post this on our website and tomorrow, we will then add an attachment you can download with questions you should consider asking when you're being recruited. Okay? And I hope that will be helpful. You go to johngself.com. On the right side of the screen is a little red button called Get Access to Our Affordable Cost. This is free. It'll be a free course, and just scroll through the course page. Once you click that button, it'll take you to Thinkific, our course warehouse and business partner, and it will allow you then to look at all the courses we offer and pick this one, a Lunch and Learn free replay, and you can download the documents. So I hope this information's been helpful. If you have any questions, why don't you send them in to me at info@johngself.com. Because we're still on a trial basis with the streaming service, we aren't seeing all of the questions come in on real chat. We're probably going to shift over to Zoom in next week or the week after, and using this as just a transmission device instead of the platform for broadcasting. So now let's look at some questions and answers that have come in earlier today in anticipation of this topic, because we've been promoting this topic rather aggressively. Can I join another firm after accepting an offer? Yes, you can, but when you do that, you're probably burning the bridge with that employer. So if it's a company you like, you need to be very thoughtful about this. Now, if this job, we all get into this bind in recruiting, and as a recruiter, I watched it happen all the time. The client never moves as fast as I want them to. The process never moves as fast as you want it to. So you may have another company that's a good company that's offered you a good deal, but my client is running a little bit behind. It's a better deal. It's more of your dream job. Okay? You're worried about, you're looking for a job, you don't want to be left in the unemployment line too long, you don't want a gap on your resume, so you take that other job and boom, my client gives you an offer. What should you do? Well, it is a personal decision. It's a decision that, that's based on how your integrity allows you to look at these issues. It is not uncommon. It is not uncommon for people to pull out of an offer because they get a better offer. Now, you have to be, it's a lot better if you do pull out before you start to work. okay? Because once they brought you in and onboarded you, it's a lot more expense. So if you're going to do that, it's best to do it before you start work with the other company. I've had people do it to me. I didn't like it. I was pissed off. I was angry, but I understood. But what you need to do is be very ethical. You need to be very above board and be transparent. And if you are with a bigger organization and you're trying to get in and they really like you, but they're just, they're just slow movers, okay? They're slow horses. You might tell the recruiter, look, I'm getting an offer from another company. What is the time frame here? Because I'm not going to sit back and not accept one of these offers. And that recruiter might be able to help expedite the process. So that's some guidance on that. What should I include in my CV if I don't have a lot of working experience? Well, first of all, unless you're an academic, it's not a CV, it's a resume. Okay, and I don't mean to step on anybody, but that's a common mistake. Don't get in the practice of making it. It happens all the time. I hear it all the time. What's on your CV? Walk me through your CV. It's a resume. It's a chronological resume. And so a CV is an academic document for academicians and people applying in academic or scientific environments. If you don't have experience, let me ask you a question. Did you have a job in high school? You worked as a retail clerk in a bookstore, and let's say you did such a good job in the summer that the store owner allowed you to close up on certain days of the week. That's experience that you can use to talk about, you had supervisory experience, that you had some management responsibilities, you were trusted, you learned lessons. Those are all things that you can mention to some degree on your resume, but certainly bring up in the interview. Lifeguard, you're responsible for taking care of a lot of people. Camp counselor, those are all things that if you don't have any industry experience, those types of things show that you've had a job, you were paid a salary, that you fulfilled your responsibilities, and that you got good referrals and you got good recommendations. Say you did one camp and you kept getting brought back and you kept going up each summer. That's impressive. If you don't have any experience, it's better than not having any experience on the resume. Excuse me. I'm writing a resume. How should I list my promotions, or do I just list my current position? Oh, no. You want to list your promotion. And here's how you do it. You say you have a company and it's XYZ Corporation. You put that across the top, boldface it, put your city, the city where it's located, and then put 2 or 3 sentences of what that company does. Then indent and put your new job with that company. I don't care if it's just 2 or 3 weeks. It is, say you moved up from a manager to director, or a manager to senior director. Maybe you're just a manager, but you were, if it's a manager with a new title, you list it separately. If it's just a promotion with more money and additional responsibility, you can probably add that into your scope of responsibility. When you prepare your resume, company, city, what does the company do? Recruiters like to see that. Then drop down. What's your job title? What's your scope of responsibility? We want to see those things. And then 4 or 5 dot points for your significant or quantifiable achievements. Okay. Is it a bad idea to have a 3-month employment gap on your resume every 1 to 3 years? Not to be catty, but what do you think? Yes, it can be very, very harmful to your career. Even if it's early in your career, 15 years ago, okay, it's not going to probably come back and bite you. But a lot of people who did in the Great Resignation, who did really quick jumps to get more money and better pay and better jobs, that's okay when everything is great. But when the market slows down and companies get really concerned about making hiring mistakes, and they look at maybe 4 jobs over a year, that's going to be problematic for you. So you need to be very cautious about doing that. Are there going to be times in your career that you should move from one job to the next job within a year because you've got a great new title and a lot more money? Absolutely. No recruiter in the world, or no decent recruiter in the world, is going to hold that against you. To growth in your career. But if you're doing it on a regular basis, that's really bad. Now, if you have health issues that cause you to have those gaps, or there are other issues involved, we probably could talk about those. You schedule a call with me, but that's sort of some guidance in that area. What is the easiest way to prepare a resume? Okay, first of all, before you write a word, figure out what is your value. Understand your value. And how do you do that? What does that mean? When I interview you, I'm probably going to ask, tell me why my client should hire you. If I'm the client, tell me, what is it that's not on your resume that will describe who you are and why that will add value to my organization? That's your value. That's your value statement. We call it a value brand statement. Understand that. Get it down pat before you start your resume. Why? Because it's going to allow you to be more focused in writing that resume. Before you start, after you get that done, collect all the information, dates of employment, where you worked, what the company did. Be sure you have all of your information there regarding what your job was. Be sure you describe your scope of responsibility and 3 to 5 quantifiable achievements, okay? Overseeing a budget of $12 million is not a quantifiable achievement. That's a scope of responsibility statement. I supervised a staff of 30. That's a scope of responsibility statement. Quantifiable achievements are you beat budget, you delivered projects on time or ahead of schedule, you exceeded revenue projections, you exceeded profit expectations, you got high marks for customer service, you reduced turnover. Those are quantifiable achievements. And so it's really helpful when you have all that information together, you start putting it down. On our website next week, we will be posting a free resume guide with some examples of what resumes look like. There are basically 3 kinds of resumes. There's the chronological resume, which is what recruiters prefer. There's functional resumes. If you're like that earlier question that has a 3-month gap every 1 to 3 years, you're going to want to use a functional resume to try to hide that. Now, I'll tell you, if you're dealing with a really good recruiter, they're going to see that and go, time out. I want to see a chronological resume. We don't, because they know functional resumes cover gaps in or other problems. Now, if you're changing career, functional resumes can be very, very helpful. The other is the CV, the curriculum vitae, and that's if you're applying for an academic or scientific position. Don't call your resume a CV. Okay, I'll see if there's anything else that we've gotten in. How do I add courses and certificates to my resume, especially if I have a lot? Well, that's a great question. And let me tell you what you don't do. I saw a healthcare person once that had so many certifications. Their name was on the left margin of the resume, and the certifications, there were so many it went all the way to the right margin. And only 2 or 3 of them had anything to do with the job they were applying for. Time out. Don't do that. Only use the certifications after your name that apply to the job that you're applying for specifically. And you can put the other relevant certifications at the bottom. If you put everything down there, for some people, some employers, some recruiters, they look at that going, how the hell do they have time to do their job getting all these other certifications that they have to recertify for? So, don't look like you're a dabbler. Be focused and only use the certifications after your name that are relevant to the job. Also, do not list non-terminal degrees after your name. A PhD, a doctor of public health, a doctor of healthcare administration, a doctor of philosophy, those are all terminal degrees. A master's in business administration is not. Don't list that after your name. That goes down with your degrees. Also, on your resume, when you're putting all of it together, remember, it's got to be customized. You've got to speak to the job you're applying for. You have to use the keywords from the industry as well as the keywords from the job description and job summary all throughout the resume. That's the way to get past that's one way to have a better chance getting past the resume bots. Okay, I think we're just about out of time today. I hope this has been helpful. We'll be posting this probably later this afternoon or tomorrow, probably tomorrow, on our webpage at johngself.com. Punch that little button on the right-hand side and it'll take you to our course page, and look for Lunch and Learn for December the 8th, 2022. Thanks very much for watching. Later this afternoon, if you want to refer us to a friend, we'll be on Instagram at 12:30 Pacific Time, 2:30 Central Time, and tonight we'll be live on TikTok at 7:30 p.m. Thanks so much for watching. We hope you have a great day.